Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Hey, very well. How are you?
Good. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, I'm totally amused by your shop and by the buzz that has generated around this story.
Oh, it's one of the most exciting, I think. It's why I have a museum. You know, the history,
Mhm.
the artifacts mean nothing almost. It's the
Yeah,
stories that really make everything and make it interesting, and especially
yeah,
when there's stories like this that are
yeah.
really out there
Yeah, this one's
that
pretty
were.
wild.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have your book. I had a hell of a time finding it, which was funny. I
Oh,
used to keep it on top of the Cooper Hewitt lamp and
yeah,
moved it to the library. And I have so many books in there now.
yeah,
It's like trying to track it down. But
yeah.
um, what a cool book. And
Thank you.
uh, it's uh, it's a task to put together someone's life a century
Yeah.
later. And it's really I can't imagine how much time it took you to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And the lamps, it's a funny story. I always wanted one of these lamps, and I found one in a auction called in Boston Grogan Auction House. They had this
Hmm.
massive medical auction of a guy, Eli Buck, and like really, really cool stuff. And I went
Hmm.
there to bid on one X-ray machine that was part of huge part of the museum, the inventor who made it. And I was there with the family of the inventor, and it was
Oh,
supposed to
wow.
go for like $300 to $400. And I brought $2,000, planning on winning this thing. I stopped bidding at $6,000 and somebody got it for 6,500, which with auction fees was like 6,800. And the guy
Wow.
didn't even know what it was. It was just a rich guy with a lot of money that was determined that
Oh,
I wasn't going to get it.
I
And
hate that.
oh, it was awful. And so I ended up bidding on this lamp, not thinking I would win it, and I won it for like $200 or something like that. And I know
Hmm.
it was rare, and it was like 5 pounds of mercury in it. And I bought a bunch of UV lamps, and so a friend of mine who was with me was actually like the former lead electrical instructor for OSHA, and he
Oh,
actually
wow.
drove it all back to Chicago and giving me hell about how much mercury was in his car.
Yeah.
And I ended up, yeah, we ended up picking it up, and I ended up going up to Chicago, and um,
Did you know then, like you knew about Cooper Hewitt and
I knew vaguely about him, but I started researching him more since I worked here because we make
yeah.
ultraviolet lamps, and he was a huge player in the early development of those.
Hmm.
And I couldn't take the lamp off the wall because I forgot it was actually bolted to one of the walls in the museum. But I
Hmm.
have this is one of his UV bulbs, which
Oh,
you can see how
wow.
much mercury is in it. There's a good pound and a half or so.
Yeah.
And
Now, what happens if mercury touches the skin?
oh, I've had it in my hands before. It's
Okay.
it's not a good idea to get it in your body because
Yeah.
it travels in your blood, and the thing
Yeah.
that filters it out really well is your brain. So it
Yeah.
ends up getting stuck in your brain and tumors and that sort of thing.
Oh,
But it's more bad to breathe in the vapors from it more than anything.
okay.
So when you're making lamps and that, you're vacuuming the air out, and sometimes the vapors come through the pump.
Mm.
That's when you got to be kind of careful.
Hmm.
Um,
That's fascinating.
but I brought something else here. This is what made him his fortune, this octopus looking thing.
Oh,
This
wow.
is mercury arc rectifier. And so
Uh-huh.
this is really where his fortune came from.
Uh-huh.
Westinghouse system one of AC and DC, but they still needed DC powers at pretty high levels for charging cars and this sort of thing back in the day.
Uh-huh.
And so they needed to get DC, and he discovered with one of his lamps with a meter across it one day that there was DC power through one of the
Hmm.
extra terminals. And so he was clever to take advantage of that, and he ended up making this rectifier. And
Yeah.
there's not many of these things around either. Trying to find them's hard these days.
Yeah.
But um, that explains the $10 million.
Right.
Yeah, which was an incredible amount of money. I mean, he developed a bunch of cool lamps that there's like zero in existence. and including like wireless type of lighting like Tesla and electrodeless bulbs and just the
Hmm.
plethora of lighting and UV bulbs. And I wish I knew more about him, but I'm a lot more interested in Anne after finding
Yeah.
a lot of these things. It started off with about the time that you contacted me, I found this press photo on
Hmm.
eBay.
Yeah, I think I've seen that one. That's the many love letters that were sent in.
Yeah. But recently I got a copy of, this is really fascinating. This is the actual um
That
showing
is,
sterilization.
yes, I have never seen that. That was one that was totally new to me. It's incredible.
It was, and this was all from San Francisco archive.
Wow.
And, on the back, I don't know if there's all the other
Yes, the little
type of press
like
photos.
yes.
But she was gorgeous, and
Yeah.
what a tragic story. I mean, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna probably frame all of these and hang them up because they're
Yes. That's she was really petite.
yeah. I was hoping you could tell the story because and no one better to tell it than you.
Yeah.
And there's so much interest in it, and I think it touches on so many subjects that are kindred with my museum,
Hmm.
like history that gets swept under the carpet, and especially the darker sides of our own history here.
Hmm.
People don't want to believe that we're definitely
And I hear your state has been very active in sweeping things under the rug.
oh, it's the worst. I'm minutes from Palm Beach Island, and though I can't
Yeah.
horrors that happen there, or I
Oh, yeah.
don't even
That's
want to think
where,
about it.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's where a lot of the Nazis came through, right?
I'm sure. I mean,
Yeah.
it's you
That
know,
there was an effort to like smuggle them from Germany into the US so they didn't have to face like the Nuremberg trials and things like that.
hmm.
But they came in through Palm Beach. That's what I've heard.
Oh, I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised. I mean,
Yeah.
it's I avoid this place like the plague. It's a very weird place when you're going, you're driving on this island and there are apartments for rent for 50,000 a month.
Wow.
I mean, it's like what yeah, I know that's just a whole different world.
Mm-hmm.
So how
Yeah.
did you learn of Anne's story and where did this all begin?
That's a really good question. And it began because I was researching the history of diabetes and insulin. My daughter had been diagnosed as type 1 diabetic, and I became curious about the history of that disease and the history of insulin. And I happened to read that the discovery of insulin in the early 1920s wasn't celebrated by all because um, people thought that insulin was now going to give diabetics a chance to live and then pass on their defective genes.
Oh, wow.
That really stunned me. And this was because of the prevalence of eugenics in the air and thinking about the fitness of the race and wanting
Yeah.
people to be able-bodied. So I was like, wow, I really have no idea what the eugenics movement was. And so I just started to research that movement. And it was in a book about eugenics by Wendy Klein. It's called Building a Better Race. She had a chapter about Anne, and it took my breath away. I was shocked that there wasn't already a book about her. I was
Yeah.
shocked that there wasn't a movie about this because it was so um, sensational, but also so interesting and, like really revealed this underbelly of America. And so the story from the first just gripped me. And as soon as I found out no one else had written the book, I knew I was going to write the book.
Oh, it's awesome. It's incredible. It's crazy, the I got involved with the museum, just as a hobby 30 years ago. And
Hmm.
I found some weird devices and they were kind of cool. And there was nothing on the internet. And the internet back then had a lot less it was more information compared to
Mhm.
disinformation, in the 90s
Mhm.
anyway. It was kind of just a really interesting encyclopedia of things.
Mhm.
And there was nothing on any of this stuff. And I thought, oh, maybe that's my calling in life.
Mhm.
Then I found out later, okay, well, it's because of quackery and because of this great solution of all this was we'll just confiscate it all and burn it because the public's too stupid to learn for themselves. And, what does that do? That just lets it reinvent itself every 10 or 15 years,
Mhm.
just done perpetually. And it also covered up a lot of really cool, important history that just got lumped in because of association.
Mm.
And so
Mhm.
there were so many like authentic technologies by inventors of the same equipment. And, and it all got lost in one
Mhm.
swoop. And
What a
so,
shame.
and so it's been an effort of like republishing all this and finding what hasn't been destroyed and putting it out there. Basically.
Mhm. Well, that's important work.
Mm. Not many people see that at all. And it's crazy how content people are. And even authors, there was a friend of mine, Bob Campbell, he wrote a beautiful biography on the first airmail pilot who was an X-ray pioneer. And he would have known Peter Cooper Hewitt, actually. And
Huh.
he went to like 100 publishing companies and they all said, if this guy's forgotten, it's for a reason. Let it go.
Mhm.
And it's like, what logic is that,
That's a shame.
But
So it was never published?
no, he self-published in the end, and
Oh,
it
he
cost
did.
him a fortune. And but
Mhm.
beautiful book. I mean, it's extraordinary. But
Mhm.
so, tell me a little bit about Anne's story. Like, this is I think I'd rather hear it from you and not make mistakes when I retell it
Mhm.
because it's unbelievable in so many ways.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, she was born in 1914, infamously on the day that World War One broke out in Europe. And at the time, they were living in her family's Paris apartment. And the mom always reminded her of the day of her birth. She would say, "You were born on a very evil day, Anne," as if that somehow like foretold what an ominous life she had ahead. Her parents weren't married at the time. She was the child of an affair. But her dad, of course, the famous inventor, Peter Cooper Hewitt, did leave his wife and marry her mother. And he was largely, traveling the world, very tied up with his businesses, his scientific inventions, such that she didn't see him all the time. And she was reared by her mother. And her mother didn't have a lot of interest in her. She seemed to resent her. She would call her an imbecile and an ugly duckling and would send her away to, boarding school or to these different sanitariums, even as a child. So she grew up hearing that there was something wrong with her. Then, when she was 7 years old, her father died, and her mother, after that, perceived her to be very flirtatious. And it's hard to tell what is true and what was the mother's fabrications at trial. But the way the mother told it, as a teenager, as a young woman, Anne was very amorous and she liked working class men. So she would flirt with the people who serviced the trains, with the chauffeur. Um, Notably, the mother said that she would cross the color line, meaning that she would flirt with black men. And you can see in retrospect, after her sterilization case, I'll get to that in a minute, comes to the forefront, like what the mother is doing. She's
Mhm.
trying to stir these fears of race mixing,
Yeah.
because there was so much anxiety in the early 1920s and 30s about the purity of the white race. And that had to do with like the changing demographics of America. So there was a lot of migration. Cities were becoming more diverse because there was this movement of Black people from the South to the North. So
Yeah.
cities like Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, they're diversifying. There's a lot of anxiety about that and this fear that the white race was being polluted and mixed. So when Anne was 20, or was actually right before her 21st birthday, her mother decides to have her sterilized without her knowledge. And the truth of her reason seems to be that she wanted the family money because when Peter Cooper Hewitt had died, he had a very curious provision which said that I think it was two-thirds would go to Anne and one-third to the mother, unless Anne died childless, in which case that money reverted to the mother, even though they had been estranged at the time of her death. So it seems to me and to other historians that really it was financial,
Yeah.
that she wanted the wealth. But of course, the case like quickly gained the attention of authorities. It quickly was written about in the newspaper. The New York Times ended up writing 50 stories on the case that year,
Wow.
1936. And in her defense, Marianne really appealed to these eugenicist fears and essentially argued, Anne was a flirt. She was an imbecile. And at the time, those were thought to be one and the same. Like if you were mentally ill, you were sexually promiscuous and vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The things
Uh,
you could be confined in an asylum for back,
yes,
everything
exactly.
from
Right.
masturbation to being gay to
Right. Right.
anything out of the norm.
Anything. Right. And the danger of the oversexed woman, as she was called, is that she was prone to cross the color line. So Anne is oversexed, and because she's so promiscuous, she will cross the color line and bear a mixed child. That's the logic.
Hmm.
And so Marianne was very smart. She knew what she was doing, and she made sure to muster a defense of herself that really appealed to the racial anxieties of the day.
Wow. It's this whole eugenics movement. It blows my mind because there's even one of the UV pioneers, Frederick Strong, was about as out there as anyone, open to every kind of psychic phenomena, communicating with the dead. He was
Mhm.
heavy into the theosophy movement.
Mm.
And yet there's elements of that even in some of the writings that he had in his scrapbook, where it was appealing to people that otherwise you wouldn't think it would appeal to. And then
Yeah.
on the other side, there were people, at least in my studies, there was a Georgia doctor, Eugene Corson, who was trying to there were articles in the early part of the century that the blacks are going to take over because they're having so many kids and this and that.
Mhm.
And he, as a doctor, he put out some articles saying not really. He said because they're at least in the town he was in, they were dying of diseases just as quickly. And he was not trying to be a racist about it, but just putting out the medical facts that this isn't really an issue at all.
Mhm.
They weren't getting the health care that they needed, and that this, no matter how many births they have, the deaths seem to be just as quick, unfortunately, for that
Mhm.
crowd. And so, and he was, not as much of a free thinker as the other people were. And the
Mhm.
thing, even Tesla had been involved with the whole eugenics thing, and it's
Mhm.
just it's strange what circles these people followed.
Well, there were a lot of wealthy backers. So
Yeah, yeah.
Rockefellers, a woman named Mary Harriman, I think she had made her money from railroading. And there was totally a shift in thinking about what the rich's responsibilities to society were. So they began to have the idea that, charity was only making the problem worse because it's just allowing these people to live and be poor and procreate. So there's more and more of them, and they're really such a drain on society. And so a lot of the Knickerbockers, the very wealthy elite in New York, began to fund the eugenics movement. But it really wasn't an idea that was confined to the elite. This really surprised me.
Yeah.
It was pushed out to the masses. So, for instance, at state fairs, there would be exhibits where children would compete for prizes based on the whiteness of their skin, the clean arch of their noses. There were better babies contests, and it's like the most plump looking Fairchild blue-eyed ones would win, and they would get like a little medal that said, "Yours is a goodly heritage."
Wow.
So humans were literally like on stage the way that livestock were being put
Yeah.
on stage. And there are pictures of Americans at the state fair, just kind of at these exhibits. Um, it was also pushed out in sermons. So a lot of Christian denominations pushed the idea that eugenics was a sacred thing because it was bringing humanity closer to perfection. And a lot of what are called postmillennialists believed that, that humanity had to reach this kind of golden state before Christ returned. So the sooner you could do away with things like poverty, criminality, disease, the sooner Jesus would return. And so they truly believed that eugenics was a sacred project.
Wow. It's so strange and so bizarre in many ways. I mean, I'm thinking of like just in Peter Cooper Hewitt's circle in
Mhm.
general. I mean, they were um a lot of them just got rid of all traditional religious beliefs and took on a more worldly view. And to think that this could be coinciding with that, it's just like polar opposites. And
Mhm.
crazy to think about, really.
Yeah, I think I read this is quoted in the book, but Charles Davenport, who was like one of the big figures of the
Yeah,
movement, he founded the eugenics record office in Cold Springs. And he was described as having a kind of religious fervor
yeah,
about eugenics. Like, even though he was the scientific, secular man, he had the passion of a Pentecostalist,
yeah.
like really believing that this was something divine.
Hmm. Wow. And the trial didn't work out so well for Anne, did it? I mean, it's unbelievable. Also, is the how where what happened with all this? Where did it go?
Right. Right. So the news broke in January 1936 that Anne was suing her mother for $500,000 for the sterilization. And after that news broke, it was read by the district attorney in San Francisco, where she had filed the case. And he quickly files criminal charges against the mother for mayhem, which I really knew nothing about before this story. But the charge was having to do with like the disfigurement of a person. And so the mother flees to the East Coast and kind of sets up shop in New Jersey, New York, and did try to take her own life from the stress of it, but responded to some of the pleadings and gave her side of the story. And there was a total shift in the public opinion. If at first people were very sympathetic to Anne and they thought, oh my goodness, how could a mother do this to her own child? The more that Marian began to appeal to those racist fears of the day, the more she began to say, Anne's such a flirt, she's oversexed, she's a danger to the race. Then the public kind of um, shifted its thinking, at least as measured by the writing in the newspaper. Like,
Yeah,
we don't know totally where the public fell, but in reading the newspaper commentary of the case, it does seem like the sympathy went away from Anne more towards the mother. And not recognizing the mom was a mess too,
yeah, yeah,
right? Like, here's two women that are throwing punches at each other, and people felt really neither one of them should be a mother.
yeah. Right. Uh,
Um,
it's,
and so yeah, there was never justice for Anne. and she and her mother never reconciled. Um, so
It's and his estate, it all went to the mom essentially,
mm.
or
Well, the mom died before Anne.
oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. She had a stroke a few years after the trial, and so she died. Anne inherited the money, and she really went on to lead a life that resembled her mother's in that she married five different men.
Oh, wow.
And and many of them were working class, exactly as the mother said.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then she died in her 40s. She had an abdominal cancer and
Oh,
is buried in this like little cemetery in Mexico where she was last living.
oh, wow.
Hmm.
Incredible.
Hmm.
There's a picture I found of them on Palm Beach in Palm Beach.
Hmm.
When Anne was very small, and it just and Peter's in the picture too, and it just made me cringe because I just think about Palm Beach Island and all the craziness that's happened there. Uh,
Yeah, and I
seeing
was so
that,
glad to see that photo because I don't think I had ever seen all three of them together. But it really struck me because he is facing her, he's kneeling down, he's giving her attention. And
mhm.
the way that she always described her dad was that he was very doting and loving, which was quite a contrast with her mom.
I've heard only good things about him, which I don't know if they're true, but
Hmm.
there's that
There
picture.
it is.
A really cool picture.
Yeah, it is.
It's
It
crazy to think that just the contrast in characters. I mean, I he was his inventions is are really interesting. So it kind of it I think he was more of like an inventor's inventor where he was out there doing stuff, experimenting just for the sake of it and seeing where it goes. And I don't know. I know he worked himself quite high in the GE company as far as what he was
is.
doing. He became very important there. And
Hmm.
so there's the wealth of the family. I know there's a lot of there were a lot of publications with Cooper Hewitt, and I think there's even maybe connection with Smithsonian Institute or some of
Hmm.
these museums. Do you know anything about that?
The Cooper Hewitt Museum in New York may be a Smithsonian now. I'm not
Oh,
sure.
okay. Okay.
I'm not sure.
So there's
Um,
it's an art museum, right? Or
mhm. Like art and textiles, which is what some of the sisters were into, I
okay.
believe. But as far as I know, there's still the Cooper Union, the school,
Okay.
which was founded by the family. And that
Yeah.
was to give people a chance to study the sciences and engineering who might not have had the financial means to do so. And as far as I know, that school is still in existence.
It would be interesting to check out their archives, see what they have.
Yeah.
His
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a nightmare this year. There was a guy a few months ago on eBay who sold had six of his lamps listed in the original shipping box near Nella Park, which is where a lot of the lamp research was in Ohio.
Hmm.
And my boss bought them all. I showed him the auction. It was like $1,500, and I said, "Look, I'll drive and get them, because they're full of mercury." And I ended up renting a car, and the eBay seller said, "Well, I'll meet you halfway if we want to go to Raleigh." And I
Hmm.
drove up to Raleigh, and it was a no-show. It was a complete scam,
Oh,
and I
oh,
lost a couple $1,000s in the
oh
rented
no.
truck. And of all the weird things to scam someone over, it would be antique light bulbs. But
Yeah.
there's not many on display. There's Smithsonian has one. I have one on display. There's a few of them floating around in private hands. And
Hmm.
there was just one that showed up in a neon sign shop in New Jersey. So I
Mm-hmm.
may buy it and drive it back home on a trip I have planned in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just to add some more to that part of the collection and
Mm-hmm.
story. And
Mm-hmm.
Ann's story, of course, there's more photos floating around, and they're expensive when you when you start buying them, but it's such a good story. I think
Mm-hmm.
I'll continue on with that.
Yes, I bought a few of the photos myself, but I also got a really special gift from somebody out there. Not long after the book was published, a guy emailed me to say he had been cleaning out his grandfather's attic and he found a book that had the name Ann Cooper Hewitt inside. And so he Googled and he wrote, needless to say, I was shocked by what I found. And it was actually her French book, which is a really important part of the story because when Anne was on trial, she defended herself as not being an imbecile, as not being stupid, by saying, I'm fluent in French and Italian and I know Shakespeare. So she wasn't really like challenging the logic of eugenics. She was just saying, I'm not a fit candidate to be sterilized because I'm
Right.
so smart and cultured and well-bred, essentially. But it was the French book that she had studied as a child. And so I, write the guy back and I said, how much do you want for it? And he said, I can tell it's important to you, so I'll just send it. And so he
Oh, that's
sent them
incredible.
out to me. And it's really great because I take it around when I do book talks, and it's a
Hmm.
really special gift.
Oh, that's incredible.
Hmm.
It makes me wonder what else is out there because
Right.
I can't imagine the library her father would have had, and just even finding like patent applications, or I mean, he must have a trail a mile long. But
Hmm.
also, the other headache is we know what these. I mean, I just saved GE's last lightning lab, and their whole library was in trash bags piled to the ceiling in a room. So,
Hmm.
I mean, if I hadn't been there at the right time, it would have all been in the trash. So
Wow.
I know their history is, yeah, it ends up not being preserved, to put it mildly.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it would be interesting to focus on his life and work a little bit more and see
Hmm.
what rabbit holes, what other rabbit holes there are to go down.
Right. Or what ideas did he have that never went anywhere?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And he took some uh ideas that Tesla was flirting around with and actually made them practical. And I don't know the extent because finding, a lot of these light bulbs exist in one and twos, if that, in the world. But like electrodeless lamps or something that we've been experimenting with, because if you have a gas discharge lamp and there's no filaments or no metal in the bulb, they never burn
Hmm.
out. It's just a matter of
Hmm.
there's nothing to introduce impurities into the lamp and cause them to fail over time.
Hmm.
So it would be nice to find some of those early examples.
Hmm. Hmm.
They were commercialized. The LED took over, and they were commercialized in the 90s and pretty much became obsolete immediately with the LED lights.
Hmm.
But to think that it was all, almost 100 years later before something he was working on really made it to the market,
Hmm.
kind
Well,
of successfully.
the mercury lamp was obsolete pretty quickly, right? Because it just wasn't suited for residences and it cast like a reddish color. That's what I remember.
Oh, it was green, so it was a
Oh, it
kind of
was
a
green.
blue-green color,
Okay.
and so it made everyone look sick. Like
That's
when you're
right.
under
That's
the
right.
light, it would
Yeah.
they
Right.
they linked it to like depression, and but the
Mm.
solution was
Mhm.
pretty simple. They just put a phosphor on the inside of the lamp, and it became
Right.
fluorescent lighting, which everyone
Right.
knows and is still around.
Uh-huh.
So in the early days, it was just the color was the biggest
Hmm.
issue.
Hmm.
And that, you know, the opponents of that type of system were saying that it was like walking around with dead people in like an office because it just
Mm-hmm.
made the color of everyone look different.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows, maybe that's part of the eugenics movement too, is that suddenly people weren't
Yeah.
as white as they're supposed to be. Suddenly
Right.
greenish and you
Oh,
know.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that his wife, Ann's mother, was very caught up in her appearance, so she wouldn't have liked any bad lighting. She always wanted to be caught at a good angle.
So I have a catalog of the lamps, which is pretty rare.
Oh,
I'm wondering who
wow.
the people were because there's a young
Yeah.
girl in it.
Uh-huh.
Well, I don't
Oh, yeah. That doesn't quite look like her to me.
know.
Yeah. I wonder who it is, though.
Yeah, I wonder too. And it's a pretty rare catalog because it's all of
Hmm.
these early lamps that we don't really know of
Hmm. What's the year on that?
one or two of in existence. This is, I don't see a year.
Because he died in 1921, I think.
I'm gonna guess that this was in the teens,
Okay.
maybe, or slightly before that.
Hmm.
Actually, no, maybe a little bit earlier because this was actually Cooper Hewitt Electric, so it wasn't labeled GE in any way.
Hmm.
Um, I'll have to look into that. It might be like the first decade of the
Okay.
1900s.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a you can count these pamphlets and things on the fingers of one hand that are out there. It's hard to get them these days. And yeah, the light lamps are even harder to find because they're full of mercury. They break. And
Hmm.
his more famous lamps are, you know, over 50 inches long. So the chance of them breaking are pretty easy.
Yeah. That must be really difficult to transport.
Oh, it's a pain in the ass. You have to literally drive and pick them up. There's no other way. Yeah.
Hmm. How many people would it even take to lift something like that?
The bulb's not too bad, but the ballasts in these things were a lot of times around 100 pounds, 150 pounds. A
Hmm.
lot of them were on floor stands. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, it's they're not the UV lamps are easier to move because they can take out the bulbs are small, you can take it out, but the other lamps, some of the fixtures were, you know, around 56 inches long, something like that.
Hmm.
So,
Wow.
just moving and transporting and safely disassembling something was a headache.
Hmm.
And yeah, and finding this other stuff, who knows if we'll ever find most of them, but
Hmm.
they're out there in a small number.
Hmm. So you must be constantly combing the internet.
I am, but it's after the last story of driving to Raleigh, I'm kind of fed up
Right.
with them. So it
Right.
might be a good thing if I can pick up this one in New Jersey and just call it a day. Uh,
Hmm.
I'll be happy with two of them.
Hmm. There you go.
And what's your other book looks really interesting too. I saw an interview on that. That's
Mhm.
um tell
Yeah,
me that.
that is a story about four quadruplets born in 1930 who all developed schizophrenia and were studied by the National Institute of Mental Health. And when NIMH first got wind of these girls, they thought for sure it was proof of the genetics of mental illness because here there's four, they're identical, they all have it. But when they really began to study and talk to the girls, it became evident that they had really lived in this house of horrors. Their dad was abusive. They were put on display from the time they were born. So they literally came home from the hospital and people were coming to the house to view them as this kind of carnival show. And they would
Wow.
pay porter to watch their mom change their diapers or bathe them. Sometimes people would be peering in the house in the middle of the night. So the public really took a sick fascination with the girls. And they made money for the family as this sweet little troupe of singers and dancers. And it always appeared to outsiders that they lived this charmed little life. This was the era of Shirley Temple, who was one of their idols. They actually kept scrapbooks of her and would study her and try to be like her. But behind closed doors, it was quite a different story.
Ooh,
And so one of the quadruplets is actually still alive. She just turned 95 last month,
wow.
and she agreed to cooperate with the book. And so she allowed me to interview her many times. And so yeah, that's another story that's kind of like turning over a stone in our history.
That's incredible. And I'm glad she was cooperating with you. I mean, I found with these inventors, if you do find their offspring, no matter how eccentric the inventor was, a lot of times the offspring are even more eccentric or at times difficult.
Yeah.
With the whole quackery thing, a lot of
Mhm.
times they're paranoid. They don't want to talk about stuff. They're afraid of
Mhm.
being sued for stuff that happened 100 years ago, and
Mhm.
doesn't make the situation any easier when you're just trying to piece together a story.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and then other times they're people's relatives that are just so excited that someone's taken an interest in them.
Mhm.
So it's typically one or the other
Mhm.
as that goes.
Yeah, well, she had really faded into obscurity because the sisters died, and she just, well, the phenomenon of multiples isn't so spectacular these days. Like now we have IVF, there's,
Yeah.
triplets and quadruplets all over the country. So she had faded into obscurity, and when I called her, she was just like shocked that somebody had found her, that somebody was interested in, this bygone life that she had as a child.
Yeah.
So I think she really liked having someone to talk about and kind of resurrect those years with her sisters.
Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible. Well, I ordered a second copy of your book because I thought I misplaced the first. I
Oh,
was rummaging all over looking for it in the library, and I found it this morning. So I'm going to order a second copy, and I'll have to mail them to you to sign them for the museum here.
oh,
It's
yeah. Send me your address. I can send you one. You don't have to mail it to me. I'll send you
oh,
one.
oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. I really appreciate your interest.
Oh, yeah, and it's really interesting what you're doing, and I know it's not an easy thing to piece together these puzzles and
Hmm.
how much time it takes, and um, it's going down a lot of rabbit holes and getting lucky a lot of times just to find any piece of paper or something with information
Hmm.
on it.
Yeah. It's fun though.
Oh, yeah,
I love to go down rabbit holes. I love to be on a wild goose chase.
yeah, yeah. It's great, and I wonder what will become of this. As us collectors, it's funny that when we start talking about a subject matter, so many times something will just show up randomly. I think we're more aware of like looking for stuff, but
Hmm.
like I'm hoping as a result of us talking here, there might be some just piece of history show up all of a sudden,
Mm.
and
Hmm.
and something to preserve, something to tell, more stories to
Right.
tell.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. I love that. I would love to know, in what basements or attics some of this ephemera still lives.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's fascinating that you got the book, the French book. I mean, that's priceless.
Hmm.
And it's more priceless when you do the work with someone like that
Hmm.
of their lives, and then you end up with something that was theirs because it's like a
Hmm.
reward, and you know that hey, they
Hmm.
had this at one time. They were
Hmm.
looking through it, and it's a magic you can't hardly
Hmm.
replicate any other way.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time very much, and hope to well, hear more stories and keep in touch with what you're doing. That's
Yes, thank
fantastic.
you, Jeff. I'm glad we connected. Like I said, I'm so thrilled and amused by the interest in the story from people passing through the shop. It's it's exciting to know that the story and the book kind of live in that corner of the world.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's everyone gravitates to it, and it's
Hmm.
I think every for a start, people like these kind of underdog stories, and so
Hmm.
Tesla Museum, so much of what was written about Tesla was complete bullshit. But
Hmm.
people still have this, they've read it a million times and they want to learn more. And but it's the fact that they come in and they see stuff that they never heard, they never thought even existed in one place. And so all of these
Hmm.
stories are kind of intriguing for people when they
Hmm.
see, you don't normally hear these stories in museums either. It's more the friendlier stories, but now I'm going to bring out the ones that we get the more adult themed ones.
Adult themed, that's a good word for it.
Yeah, yeah, the more colorful and controversial they are, the more
Hmm.
people are interested in them.
Yep.
But at the same time, it's also kind of hopefully bringing awareness to people that, hey, there's a lot that's happening behind the scenes in our history that still exists, and
Hmm.
that we have to recognize as, hey, this was a part of American history too. As much as there was amazing things happening, there was a lot of dark sides. There was a lot of
Hmm.
just things that we've been eager to sweep under the carpet that need pulled out again and said, hey, no, like this isn't all roses and chocolates here. There's a lot of insanity that's happened in the development of everything.
Right, right. I agree. I try to be a truth teller and to listen when other people are telling the truth. I think the truth is good news. And, the truth sets free, as the phrase goes. And, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it disabuses me of some of the views of America that I heard in public school, that it's worth paying attention
Oh,
to.
for sure. I have a photo of Czech President Václav Havel, who was a great humanitarian, hanging in the
Hmm.
library, and he signed it to me. And the Czech motto is "The truth prevails." It's
Mm.
something that a lot of
Mhm.
people aren't comfortable with, and especially on medical history, scientific history, when you're not taking a side and you're showing the dirt on both sides, people really
Mhm.
don't like that. But
Yeah,
it's what you have to do. The truth is very rarely here or here. It's
right.
normally
Yeah.
somewhere in the middle with a lot of gray area and
Mhm.
with a lot of yeah, a lot of dishonesty being thrown in
Mhm.
different directions.
Mhm.
So
That's a great that's a great slogan. The truth prevails.
yeah, Pravda Vyčeří. It's a good
Okay.
Czech motto.
Okay. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of Freud, who thought along the same lines that, what you push down during the day comes back at night.
Yeah, yeah.
Repression doesn't work, folks.
Yeah, it doesn't at all. And
Yeah.
we live in it's such a weird time to live in right now. For me
Hmm.
anyway. I just look around and think, all right, this is scary on so
Hmm.
many levels. And people are so quick to gravitate to their team as opposed to
Hmm.
thinking freely for themselves. And
Hmm.
it's frankly terrifying. I
It
think on
is
so many
terrifying.
levels right now. This is not what I expected
Right.
future to be. And
Right.
I think so it makes our jobs even more important of like
Hmm.
putting the truth out there and getting people to actually think.
Hmm.
Think for
And
themselves.
making people curious
Yeah,
about
yeah.
the world. And I
Yeah.
think like that's what really strikes me about your line of work is that, you are making people curious.
That's what we need. And 100 years ago, and people like Peter Cooper Hewitt were doing it. They were putting out these
Hmm.
inventions that didn't necessarily make sense to everyone, but it sparked an interest in the,
Hmm.
what any young person could suddenly girls and boys. We're working in inventions, we're working in radio, we're working in lighting, they're experimenting in their houses and being encouraged to actually think and do stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
that idea has been outsourced completely, and we need to get back to that of,
Mm-hmm.
of just you know and instead of adding fuel to these nasty fires of people throwing shit at each other, we need to
Right.
fuel actual creativity and
Mm-hmm.
positivity in some way.
Yes. And to become curious again.
Mm-hmm. That's I think that's it's becoming, at least for me, more relevant that when to think of it when we're young, we ask questions. And then after a while, we're being told,
Mm-hmm.
don't stop asking questions. No, you need to ask questions all
Mm-hmm.
the time. And I think the minute we stop asking questions and stop having that curiosity is when we just go downhill in
Yeah,
general.
then there's trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time. And
Yes, I appreciate it. It was great to connect with you.
yeah, and I look forward to, I'll send you my address. I'd like to see
Okay.
too. And yeah, this is going back on the lamp because otherwise it's going to be in the library, and it's much better to have it there and show people
Yes, very
because
cool.
the pictures are there and everyone is like, oh, what's that? Who's that?
Yeah.
Who's that girl? So
Yeah.
excellent.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you.
Take care.
Yep. You too.